Macintosh.
Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to Macintosh 2022, and this is Eric's Edge, and today we're going to be discussing HyperCard, and specifically the Hyper-Wordle stack that I created. We'll go through the code, some of the problems I ran into. It's going to be kind of a mishmash of stuff, so I'm not following a script here, but let's go ahead and get started. Now I must warn you, this code contains the words that are in the Wordle application. So you're going to see, words that from the beginning of the game. So if you really don't want to see any of those words, you probably don't want to watch this. This is the first of several videos that I'm going to do for Macintosh regarding HyperCard. So you can see right up here, I got HyperCard. You can start HyperCard right from any one of the stacks. Each program is called a stack. If you click on HyperCard and start it right up, it goes to your home stack where you can, look through things and learn about HyperCard. We're not really going to go over that today. What I'm going to do is open my game stack, and we're going to take a look at how that's put together. So let's open stack, and we'll navigate to and open it. All right, so this is the game board. So you can see here we've got what you would expect to see. I'm not hiding the HyperCard menu or anything like that. That's something you would typically do for a game. I just wanted to show you what the card would look like if you were building it. So one of the things that I do while I'm doing a HyperCard stack, because the debugger is a little bit crude. A lot of times you want to be able to kind of keep track of what's going on in the stack in your code while you're working on it. So what I've done, if you go into I'm not going to go over all the HyperCard stuff, so there's plenty of tutorials out there for that. In the card info for the game, so card is called game. If you go to the script, I have a global variable that I use so that I can set debugging. And what that does is, if we save the code here, if we leave this card and we come back to it, boom, you can actually see some of the hidden infrastructure of the game. So we've got some fields here to help us with, and I don't have labels for them because it's debug stuff, you know what you're doing. That will tell you some information about what's going on with the game. Some of this is so that you have persistence between opening and closing the stack. So the state of whether you've won or not, the row and column that you're working on. That way you can leave the stack mid-game and then come back in and it'll remember exactly where you were at. So there's state persistence there. I've got a button for loading the words. One of the limitations of HyperCard is that these text scrollable regions can only handle, I think it's 330K, so 30,000 bytes. It also has a height limit on the character. It's the way it stores it. So if you use a smaller font, it supposedly can hold more words. Doesn't really matter. There's a limit for it. And you may know that Wordle is set up with two different lists. It's got a list of words, sort of a dictionary that says these are words that are acceptable, that it'll recognize as a word. And then there's the word list that you're actually using each day to go through and start with the first word, go to the next. There's some spoilers here, as you can see from this list right here, the very first word that was in Wordly was cigar. So I'll go back and add a disclaimer to the beginning of the video. If you don't want to know what the words are, you probably don't want to mess around with this, or only use it in game mode so that you're not seeing this stuff. All right, so a couple of other things to talk about here. So it's called Hyper-Wordle. You can start a new game by clicking on this, and it'll go to the next word. If you win and start a new game, it goes to the next word. For debugging purposes, I have a reset button, and what this does is it sets you back to the first game and clears out all of your stats and everything as if you started the game up from scratch. This is a little bit unusual. If what I'm doing is capturing the keyboard input, so you're typing and it shows up in the squares, right? Well, if you're trying to do coding in this environment and you've got it in this gaming mode where it's capturing the keystrokes, well, you can't type anything. It's capturing the keystrokes. So if you try to go to the, bring up the message box, all right, and then do, let's say so yeah, it started typing and it captured those keystrokes. So that's kind of an issue. If I click the gaming button, now it switches to coding. My cursor's here. Put hello, Argentine people. And it puts that phrase in the message box. It's another one of the things you can learn about if you look through it. And if you hit this button again, it goes back to gaming mode, so that if I type in letters, it captures them. It helps a lot when you're trying to figure out what to do. This, I already told reset, load takes a long time to run. What it does is it loads the word list and the acceptable words into these text boxes, the scrollable text boxes. So it'll actually open a file, bring them in, and it takes about 10-12 minutes to run because there's a huge amount of files. And because of the limitation of the field object, that's what this text box is, I had to actually break up the acceptable words into 3 different boxes to get it to fit. So, but we'll go over the code for that. So that's one of the limitations you run into, is there is some memory limits on the objects in here. All right. So let's go over some other things. There's a keyboard down here at the bottom that you can actually use. So if I want to type on here, which, pulled it right from the website kind of a thing. Backspace. There's also a delete key to do the backspace thing. There's an enter key so you can enter it. So let's go ahead and type in a word. I'm gonna just pick something where we at least get a letter. Okay. So, and I'll go over the help section will explain this. A solid R means that it's the letter that's in the correct place. There is color capability in HyperCard in the later versions, but I've never used it, and I'm trying to write a game that works on the black and white Macs as well as the color Macs. So it's character attributes that we're using to identify them. The outlined shadow A means there's an A somewhere in the word, but this isn't the right position for it. So, and you hit enter to test the word. You could backspace, or rather delete, to wipe it out and try it again. But once you hit enter, you're committed. It tests the word to see if it's in the acceptable word list, so you can't just do random letters. It also highlights or bolds any of the keys where there's an A and an R in the word, and there isn't a W, T, or an E, so it actually hides those keyboard characters so you can't type them again. Now, I can actually type them in manually, just like the regular game. You can do the same word over again. It's silly, but you can do it. But if you pay attention to what's on the bottom of the screen there, you'll know that, maybe you shouldn't use those letters. At least I think that's the same as the game. I can't recall. So another thing is help. So if we click on the help button, HyperCard is made up of a series of cards. And each card is independent of the other cards, and you're able to do things in the context of that card. You could have the same field name on another card and refer to it as field foobar on card game or field foobar on card stats if you wanted to. So there's a hierarchy to finding things. There's the stack, there's the card, and then the objects on the card. Cards are also set up so that they have a background layer, so you can do images and fields on that. That background, if you create a new card, is carried over to the next card. And there are ways to create a new background with a new card, and I think it's called homogeneous stacks if you have a series of cards that are all the same background, but they have different data on it. So think about index cards in a card file, or a Rolodex is a common metaphor for it. So all the fields are the same, but the data in that particular card is different. All right. So how to play? You get 6 tries, and you type the letters for your guess. So everybody knows how to play this game. If you don't, go look it up. This is a button that has been set up here so that you can actually test whether weary is the word. And it shows you the letter W is the word and in the correct spot. That's why it's solid. So this is another text box, or field is what they call it in HyperCard. And I had it hidden and then displayed it when you click the button. So let's look at the code for that really quickly. So there's the tools. The tools menu can be pulled off. So if you have a bigger screen than I've got here, you can pull it off. But this is, you're running the game and using it. You got the finger pointer. This is, I want to mess with the buttons on there. This is for fields. You can see how it changes visually. This is for selecting images. You can paint on the card surface and also paint on the background. And then you've got your usual paint tools that you have. Again, the objects are, there's the card, there's the background to the card, and then there's the stack, which is sort of a universal global section of the code. You can create new buttons, a new field, or a new background. A new background creates a new card. You can also create a new card this way with the same background of the card you're currently on. Yada, yada, yada. So let's look at the code. You just double click on the object. It's got a name, test me. It's several properties. You could set as a rectangle, things like that for the type of button. Family. I've never actually used this. I think it's so that you can create like radio buttons and have, if you push one radio button, the rest of them are disabled or unpushed. Whether you show the name or not. Auto highlight. Can't remember what that property does. Whether the button's enabled or not. All of these properties can be controlled in the code as well. You can set the text style to your usual kind of, Macintosh styles. Sorry, I didn't mean to cancel that. You have different icons, so you can actually choose from a selection of icons. They're all stored in the stack. You can borrow from other stacks, like your home stack, because it can go find the home stack. It's best to just go ahead and move them in here. And there's tools that come with HyperCard for sharing objects and moving audio resources and things like that so that you don't have to use ResEdit. You can also create your own icons. We'll go through that in a different thing. So let's go back in here. Let's look at the script. So here's the mouse up event. So like all Apple programs, it's all event driven. All of the events that you get from the system and things like that most of them are presented to HyperCard, and you can capture them by using an on event name handler. You can also use, I don't have it enabled here, AppleScript as well as HyperTalk as your language. I've never done AppleScript. I've always used HyperTalk. Anyway, so here's an event. It's contained within the card button, which has the ID of 26 and the name of test me. You can refer to a card button in the code by ID or by name, and there's a good reason for that. And I'll show you why you don't always want to refer to them by name. So it's kind of a pseudo English kind of a language setup. They tried to make it user friendly by making it English based. That's a bit of a stretch, and it's a bit of a challenge because the syntax is very important. Like, do I put the word the or not inside here? Sometimes it's required, sometimes it's not. But anyway, so we're going to set the text style of card field help 11 to bold, show card field help text 1. So the first thing, set that text block with the W in it to bold, and it was called help 11 is the name of the field. And then we showed card field help text 1. So pretty straightforward. Let's do this other one. All right, so the letter L is in the word but in the wrong spot. And again, if we go to the tools, in the script, set the text style of card field help 23 to shadow and outline. So it's a list, comma separated, shadow, outline, so you can do multiple properties for text style. Show the card field help text 2. So if I went and did the text field, selected this, if you look at the text style, it's set for outline and shadow. So the code set these properties. You could set them here too. Let's do that and see what happens. Go back to running it. So I've set it to underline. The way I set up this page is that the help refreshes each time. So if I move to more help and then go back, I'm back to the way I was when I came into the card. So if I do this, you notice the underline's gone. That's because the properties were reset. And we could go into the code here, script, outline, comma, underline. It'll ask you if you want to save it. Believe me, you always want to save the script. HyperCard can get a little weird sometimes, and it'll lose your code. It doesn't happen very often, but it can get, weird. It's a good idea to compress your stack frequently. If I make a major code change or something like that, or if I'm at a point where I'm like, this is a good point to save, I'll just copy the stack to another file, duplicate it, that kind of thing. It's crude. It's not really good code management, but it works. There's tools that you can get to try to resurrect and repair a stack if it gets corrupted and things like that, but you don't want to go there if you don't have to. All right, so let's take a look. We'll go back to the help. It's cleared. I'm going to click the button. Now it does an underline and outline and shadow. So before I forget, let's go back and change that code back to the way I had it. You'll notice that it can run off the end of the screen here. There is a character that you can do for a line continuation, so you can go to the next line. I'm using an emulator, and I'm not sure. I think, will it work? Nope. I'm not sure what to press on my Windows keyboard to get that to work properly, so I'm not going to even bother. But you could continue to the next line. Um, so save our code. You can see that the underline's gone, the code's fine, everything works. So if we go to this one, S is not in the word in any spot, and that's why it's just outlined like that. So next help. So we're on a new card, and this one is about guessing the word. So we're going to test it. Hey, guess what? It's the right word. So all the fields are outlined or shadowed, drop shadowed, and all the letters are bold. So that's how you can tell you won. And it flashes and erases your word because verbs is not a word in the dictionary. But it'll, just like Wordly, it'll let you type it in again or type in another word so you haven't lost your place. And this is a little thing telling you what's happening with the keyboard. Even more help. And these are just buttons with an icon. And they're actually pretty simple. Let's show this. So there's another card that you can do that shows the statistics of the game, right? The Wordly game has fewer than what's shown here. I went ahead and just added them anyway. So this is a kind of a cool thing. When you have this area here is a text field, or is it? No, it's not. Let's look at the code. All right, this is a button, okay? And that button doesn't have any text or anything. All it is defining a region on the screen. Anyway, so if you look at the code for this button, script, when you enter that area, it figures out the center of that box. Me is a keyword inside HyperCard to refer to whatever it is that the event came from. So the rect or rectangle of me, and you figure out, I've got a function that figures out the start point. So you put the center point of the rect of me into this variable. It's a global, and I'll show why. And then I figure out the center of the card field. The reason I'm doing this is so I can draw that line that you see between the description box that pops up and the thing that you're describing. So it's just a neat little thing where you can do graphic commands in HyperCard where you're drawing. You could draw lines. So I lock the screen so there's no changes. I show the card field, and the card field's named the same way, so I use the short name of me. The long name is card button, blah, blah, blah. The short name is whatever the button name is, about played. So I use that to show the card field, which is named about played. It's just a way of making it a little easier to do the code. Draw line, and then unlock the screen. So it shows the field, draws it. The next event here is mouse leave. So as long as your mouse enter, as long as you're there, you've entered that field, it pops it up. As soon as you leave that field, it locks the screen. I've got a function that erases the line. You hide the field and unlock the screen. So now that we know how that works, let's go over it again. So I enter the button field, drew the line, displayed the text. I go over another one, does the same thing. The function or the code is boilerplate. It could be set up as a generic card function that you call and pass me to it, and I probably should have done that. but I'm lazy sometimes and I just copied and pasted the code. So that's something maybe we can do for a refactoring session on this. Anyway, you hover over each one and it tells you something about it. This will take you back to the game. This button goes back to more help, which was the middle help screen. And this is kind of interesting. So there's a command to go back, go to the previous card, go to the next card, go to the last. All these are commands inside HyperCard. If we go to this button and take a look at the script, go previous. So that's the command, just like the menu command, to go previous. And that's what this button does. So if we click on it, we go to the previous card. Even more help just goes next. Help goes previous. See how it works? Now this, it takes you to the game, and if you remember right, the card for the game had a name. So if you look at this card, it's called Help. And if we look at this button, script, go card game. So we're actually telling it to go to the card that's named game. Very object oriented in a sense. So we click on this, we go to the game card. Card info, it's named game. Now if I change this to games, oops, I'm typing on the wrong keyboard, games, it'll let you change the name. Now anything that refers to that card by, like the fields on that card by, field foobar on card game is going to error because there is no card named games or game in there anymore. I changed the name of it. So let's go to the help. Let's click this. And it's not doing anything because there's no card. You would think it would throw an error, but it doesn't. So that's a little odd. Let's go back. So if we go previous, oh, I forgot the order. Go back. Oh, I know. There's another way I could do this. You can use the message, and that's Command M. And I can say go to card games. See, go to card worked. Go card games probably would work too. So let's do that. Let's go to help. Oh, see what I'm in gaming mode. I need to go to coding mode because this card is capturing the keystrokes again. Go to card help, games. Okay, so we're in gaming mode. I need to be in coding mode here for that to work. We're going to go to the card info, and we are going to name it back to game so everything will work. All right, so we're back to playing the game, except I'm not. I'm actually typing in a field. Probably need to set the properties for these fields so that they're locked so I can't type in them. That's something that would be odd. Why should someone be able to go in and do this? So that's what I consider a bug. Let's go back to gaming and see. It captures the keystroke. It doesn't even put it in there. Hello. Okay. Absolutely none of these letters are in the word. Since we know the word, we can tell. Still haven't won the game. That's what this field is. We're on the first word. we're in row 3 now in the first tile. So that's what these two fields are telling you. And let's just reset the game. So now we're back to fresh, new, starting with word 1 again. So let's go ahead and win. Yay, we knew the word right off the bat. Let's look at the stats. Okay, so if you go to the stats, this is kind of interesting. We played one game, we won one, so we're doing really good. We haven't had any losses. Our win percent is 100%, yay. Current streak is 1, because we only played one game, we've won 1. We haven't lost any. And our maximum streak is 1. So if you play 10 games and then lose the 11th, your maximum streak would be 10, but your current streak would be 0, because you lost. This is a kind of a neat thing. This is I pulled this code out of the home card, has a graphing example where it creates charts. So I stripped out what I needed from this code to reproduce the guess distribution. So it actually uses the paint tools to do this, sets a cursor, a location, writes the number, does a bar, yada yada yada, so that it can paint this. So this is kind of interesting. If you, I'm going to use the paint tool or the select tool, and I'm going to cut that picture. I just cut it out. It's actually just painted on the card, right? But no worries, it redoes it each time. So if I go to the stats, it just paints it over again. In fact, when you leave this card, it wipes it out so that it's always updated properly when you get into it. All of these are text fields. So this maintains state. It always knows how many you've played and everything. So if you quit the game and go back in, it doesn't forget. I did not set this game up so that you had to do only one word a day. You can do a new game as much as you want. Just eat through all the words. Let's see. So, what else can I tell you? Again, I'm just kind of going over stuff quickly here. Let's reset it back. So we haven't won anything. You go to stats. Yep, there's nothing here. All right. So that's the basic parts of the game. So let's look a little bit at the card code that actually plays the game. So I tend to put everything in the card code, and if it's something globally useful, I'll put it in the stat code. So the chart that does the stats is code on that card, and it's not global. Part of the challenge there is that you don't have real encapsulation for card code. Sometimes to do certain things you have to actually do code in the stack. And then you've got, I've got this great object. I could take this card and put it in my stack and do charting. Or I've got this really cool button that's animated and does all this stuff. Well, sometimes you can drag and drop and just put a button somewhere and it does everything you want. But if that button animates based on the idle message that you get from the operating system, guess what? The idle message is only sent to the stack level. It doesn't go to the card level. You have to pass it down to the card level, so you end up writing code in the stack. It's another one of those limitations where it's like they didn't have real object encapsulation or anything. They kind of went there, but they didn't quite do it. And I think HyperCard would have evolved, obviously, into more of an object-oriented tool if it had kept going. So here's the code for this card. So here's an open card event. So that's something that happens every time you open the card. If you have a global variable, you have to put this global keyword and the variable name at the top of where you're going to refer to it, or you can't. Here's where I really should have some kind of menu selection that says put it in debug mode, or a keystroke sequence I capture that says go to debug mode. I'm a little bit lazy because really the debug thing is only going to be while you're developing it, so I'm in the code anyway. I put true into debug here, so it's in debug mode. If it's false, and let's change that. Yes. And if we left this card and went back to it, boom, it's actually in game mode without any of the stuff exposed, and this is how a normal player would use it. And they would just start typing. Ooh, they're a genius. They guessed the word. Okay. I go back into the card script, and you can control the menu and set it up so that they can't get in there. You can say that they don't have scripting level access. You can lock the card, but there's tools to break it open. I'm not going to go into that. If you get this book, and this is actually a pretty decent book, HyperCard 2.2, the complete HyperCard 2.2 handbook by Goodman. Goodman wrote some pretty good stuff. This actually goes through and explains in a chapter, you want to release an application, here's all the things you do to create an application stack. Yeah, I like this book. It's a decent reference too, but you're all over the place in it. So the other book I have is HyperTalk 2.2, and this is by a series of guys. But anyway, it is a look up the keyword reference with a short chapter in the beginning that just tells you the structure of HyperCard and how things are arranged. But this is really good. If you know the command that you're going to use, you just go look it up, and it's got a lot better description of it than Goodman's card, because he talks about it in the context of what you're doing for that particular chapter. So he might not go into every property on it. And this is really more of a tutorial for like, I want to do HyperCard, where do I start? And the other one's a better reference for just looking up commands. Both of those books are available online as PDFs. I happen to really like having the hard copy, so I went and purchased them used for like $5 each online. All right, back to the code. So I also have a global variable called code, and I use that to say, am I coding or am I gaming? Now you'll notice on the screen when you click it, it flips between the word gaming and coding. Well, that's the actual name of the button. It's not like the label or something like that. It's literally the name of the button. If you try to refer to it by name inside your code, if it's named gaming and you try to refer to it as coding, it's not going to find the button. Well, buttons have IDs, right? You can refer to them by ID then. And that way I can just flip around the name of it, and I've always got the right button. It's not ideal. It would have been nice if they had done a name and then a label. The name doesn't change. The label is what you see, but it is what it is. And there's an issue with icons related to that I'll go over at another time. So I've got some code here that says if debug is true, then I'm going to show all those debug fields and stuff so that you can see them. I also show you the words that we're doing and what the acceptable word list is, which game number we're on. I really should do labels too, but whatever. And then if you're not, then I hide all those buttons and fields. So that's pretty simple. And that's all OpenCard does, nothing else. Now, there's a reset game, and it's a message I could have just buried this code in that reset button. But one of the things I like to do, and let's quickly go over to the, okay, so I'm going to have to, sorry, I have to change my code so that we can see the debug stuff. Yeah, I know it's a little convoluted, but it is what it is. All right, so we got that button. Oh, I'm not looking at the right button. Excuse me. We wanted to look at the reset button. So we look at the reset button, script. I just call that message by naming it and just say reset game. So think of it as like a Go sub. You can have parameters after it, and I use those because messages can have parameters. But this is a really simple way of just putting your code. That way, if I need to reset the game in a different place, I can just call that method. So let's get back to the card code script. All right. So we're at reset game. I set the game to 0. So this is one of those messages that takes a parameter. There is a function that you can use, and it must return a value, and you have to call it as if you're returning a value. There's no void, so it's really kind of flaky to use a function that way, which is why I use the message. So I'm setting the game number to 0, reset the stats. I'm resetting the stats to 0. I'm starting a new game. So all of these are routines that I use, like new game is to go to a new game, right? Resetting the stats I probably only use here, but you know, there you are. So here's the new game message handler. Put get game into the game. All right. So on the screen, there's a field that is called the game number. I could just say put the game card field the game number into the game, which is a variable I'm using. I like to use functions to kind of hide that, because what if I decided later I wanted to use a global variable, or maybe a control that you can add into HyperCard. There are extensions where you could go to the registry and do stuff. There's a bunch of reasons why you might not want to use a field. The field's the classic, easy way to do it. Well, now I've put it inside a function. If I change it, I got to change it in that one place. I don't have to go all over the place and say, oh, don't refer to card field game number. I just use this function. All right. So there's a put statement. This is their assignment statement. There's also a set statement. Some of these work better as puts than sets, so I tend to just use put because it usually always works. Again, it's an idiosyncrasy of HyperCard, or HyperTalk, I should say. So you get into certain patterns when you do this stuff. I'm doing another message where I set the game, so I'm going to the next game. I'm incrementing it by 1. I could do a routine that says set next game, and it would get the game and then increment it and do it. 6 one, half dozen the other. Setting the word, so this is the user's word. I keep track of it in a field because I use that instead of having to get each letter from the text box and build it together. And I'm setting 1 to false. We haven't 1. I'm resetting all the tiles. So all of the word tiles, or yeah, the tiles that do the letters, resetting them. And I'm setting the row and the column to the first tile. And I'm resetting all the keyboard letters, because if you've tried things, they're, you know, that's not there. That's how new game works. It's kind of self-explanatory. These double dashes are comments. And I will do a little bit of documenting in the code, but not a whole lot. Reset the game tiles. So this is that reset the game tiles thing. This is the for loop in HyperTalk. There is no for. There isn't a while. It's repeat while. So repeat is the only thing for doing an iterative thing. You can say with a variable, and that variable equals a range, and it'll just increment. You can repeat while a value is a certain value, so you have a test. There's a couple of different forms of it, but this is typically what you use. So if you see here, I'm repeating with I equal 1 to 6 and j equal to 5. That's our grid for the letters. I'm putting a blank into card field letter field. So what I've done here is I have a function that takes the row and the column and figures out what the name of the field control is for that letter. I stick it into a variable called letter field so that I can use it in here. So this is a variable that contains the name of the field. You don't have to explicitly, refer to the field. You can do it with a variable. Set the style. So I'm just repeating through all of the tiles because I've named them letter, space, row, column. And that's what this function returns. I called them boxes originally because they're boxes, and then started changing them to tiles because that's how they're described in the game. I haven't changed all the code to be consistent, so it's a little dirty. Okay, here's the keyboard handler. So this is the thing that's a little bit squirrely. I'm checking that global variable to make sure are we coding or not, because if we're in coding mode, I don't want this to handle the keystrokes. I want it to just pass them on. So it checks to see if you've won. If you haven't won, well, then that means you're still playing the game, and I take the key down event has a parameter called whatever you want to call it, but it's the key that was pressed. I take the character to num of the key and put it into key num. So I'm converting the character into the ASCII value of the key that was pressed, and that's because I need to distinguish between lower and uppercase, and you'll see why. I get the word that I'm storing to just keep track of it into the word. I use the a lot because it's kind of the syntax for referring to objects in HyperText, HyperTalk, sorry. And it also means that if I've got something, a keyword, I can avoid it. So if the key num is a 3 or 13, which is return or enter, I call a handler for enter key. There's a reason for this. If you have a lot of nested if then else's, it's very easy because of the way the screen is, and the development environment here does not collapse sections for you or do searching for the matching. A lot of the things that you take for granted in development environments now, IDEs, are just not in here. So it's easier to take a really long routine and break it up and make some function calls so that you can keep it straight and keep it simple. There is some overhead every time that you're doing that. You're handling the stack, so it's slower. HyperText is interpreted. There is in this version of HyperCard, it does compile it into some, I think it's some kind of bytecode thing. Don't quote me on that. I don't know, but there is some kind of compiling that's going on so that it runs a lot faster than the original version 1. Anyway, so if it's an 8, I'm deleting a letter, so someone press the delete key. Else, we're looking for game letters, so I'm checking to see if the key that was pressed is between the letter A and the letter Z. And if it is, then I know lowercase a or z was pressed. I convert it to uppercase because I need to use uppercase characters. And I have a routine that adds a letter, and it uses whatever the current row column identified letter box is or tile is to put that character in. And if it's already in uppercase, you just add it. I don't have to convert it. Oh yeah, this is that num to character, and you take the difference between an uppercase A and a lowercase a and you add it to the key. That's how you convert from lowercase to uppercase. Instead of just hard coding this with a number, I check to see what the actual difference is between them. So the other thing you do is in this pass key down, what if somebody's doing a keystroke to do a menu command or something like that? You don't want to capture it and throw it away. So you pass that key from this handler down so that it can go through the hierarchy to maybe there's another key handler. There's the system key handler for HyperCard, the application, and it needs those keys. So it was my first attempt at saying, oh, I need a way so that I can code because I was capturing keys and throwing them out, right? And then I ran into, oh, I can't type A through Z anywhere because it's capturing those. So that's why I had to put that am I coding or gaming variable in. Ugh. All right, enough about that. Handling the enter key. So there's a bunch of things to check here. If somebody's hit enter, it's because they've done the whole word. If they hit enter before they've entered 5 characters, well, that they're not done. So you have to ignore that. You check to see if it matches. The match is figuring out from the game number which row to read in the list of words to figure out, the first one, cigar. If the game number is 1, it reads line 1 of that text field, gets the word, and says, well, that's what the match is, or what we're matching. So it checks to see if it's a winner. And then I call a we won handler. If it isn't, then so we didn't match. You go through all the tiles and you check to see whether or not the letter matches the word in that position and handle it. So that's what this is doing. Probably should be converted to a handler or a function instead of having the code right there, but that's what it is right now. It's the only place I'm using it anyway. Could have used a function on the help screen maybe. And then you would just always, that way if I changed how the letters behave, the help would just automatically pick it up. There's a reason to use a single handler for it, but again, this is kind of quick and dirty code I threw together. Then we check the acceptable word list to see if it's an acceptable word. And I've got a function that, a function that does that. And then I set up, oh, it is an acceptable word. We need to check each character to see whether or not, is it a word in the correct place? Is it a word, is it in the word and wrong place, or it's not in the word at all? So, so I'm checking to see if it's in the word, or not. And that's another repeat. I was playing around with some special effects that you can do. You can unlock the screen with an effect of dissolve fast, and it kind of dissolves the screen into appearance. And I thought it was a bit much, so I got rid of it. So if we finish the 6th row without matching, we've lost. So we've gone through all the rows, we haven't matched, we lost. And then it handles the whole, you lost one, incrementing the stats, all that kind of thing. Else, we move on to the next row. You still have rows to guess. And you can imagine what I'm doing is incrementing the row number, but only if it's 6 or less, because you can't increment it past 6, and that tells me I'm dropped down to, row +1 basically, and I'm now working on that set of tiles. If it's not an accepted word, so it's not in the dictionary, then we've, repeat 2 times. I lock the screen, and I set the style of card field to shadow, and then I set it to rectangle, so I kind of flash all of the letters. That's what that lock screen does. Otherwise it would flash each letter in succession, which would be fine too, but that's not how I did it. And then you clear the letter tiles. So this is going through and clearing out that row of tiles. Again, probably should go into a function, or not a function, a message. But that's it. I have a to-do. I wanted to animate a tile. So on the it does that flipped box thing to animate the tiles. So a future thing would be I'm going to flip the tile and do like a visual cue for it. Doesn't do it right now, but that could be a nice enhancement to it. Just hadn't gotten around to the code. But I went ahead and I thought of it, so I put the routine in there. It probably calls it at the right place maybe, and it doesn't do anything. I don't know. Here's the acceptable word function. So function's the keyword for function, name of the function, parameters. And here's that thing. If card field words contains the word. So any of the words in the list of words to guess is an acceptable word. And then here's how I handled that problem of the field isn't big enough to hold all the words in the dictionary. You check to see if it's an acceptable 1, 2, or 3. So it gets you through everything. Another way I was going to do this, you can have a global variable that is a list of words. And I could have loaded up everything into a variable at the start of each game. The problem is that takes quite a while, and there is a memory limit to the size of a global variable. It also would not hold all of the acceptable words. So I'm back to using a field or a series of fields or a series of variables. Well, if you have the fields and they already have all the words in there, you don't have to reload it every time you start the game. It's already there as part of the memory of the HyperCard stack. So that's why it's the way it is. That was the acceptable way of dealing with it. Okay, here's some more. I'm moving to the previous letter box if possible, so someone's done a delete. That's what that previous box does. Next column, so you're moving to the next column. I'm just incrementing things. Determine the current box name from the current position. Okay, so this was that get current box. So put the word letter, space, the row, and the column into letter field. So all of those text tiles are called letter space 1, 1, letter space 1, 2, letter space 1, 3, ad nauseum. So that's how you can make a dynamic name. And that's quite frequently used in HyperCard, where you've got the name of it and then some number after it. Animation's done that way. So there's an example for an animated icon or button that uses icons, and it's juggler 1, juggler 2, juggler 3, and it's a silhouette of a guy juggling balls. Anyway, so that's very typical. Resetting the keyboard letters. So I'm going through, the keyboard letters are nothing but tiny little field boxes, and I'm going through and just resetting them, their properties and making them visible. Set a keyboard letter. So here I'm setting, is the letter in or not, and what the letter is. So it goes through all the card fields are called letter space A, letter space B, etc. So it's really easy to find it and set it to visible or outline or bold. Go to the next row. So you just go into the next row and you can see my test to say if the row is less than 6, then you can go to the next row. And again, I'm using these messages in lieu of referring to the card field. Handle winning. So set we won to true. This is referring to the wins, the streak, the plays, and the row that are on the stats. And then I increment them by 1. You know, you won. Your streak is incremented by 1. The number of plays is 1. And then handling losing, similar thing. It tells you answers is the function that is used to tell somebody, ask somebody something or tell them. It's the dialog box. It's a very simple dialog box. You can have 1, 2, or 3 buttons. If you don't define a button, it just sticks an OK on it, so you can use it like a message box. Remember the message thing I was typing into? That's another thing you can use to converse with the user. But somebody can type commands into it and stuff, so I usually don't use it. So answer, this one is saying, sorry, the word is, in quotes, what the word is. Oh, here's that continuation character I was telling you about. I ask if they want to play again. And with OK or cancel, whatever's last in the list is the default that's highlighted. So typically cancel is usually highlighted instead of OK. If it's OK, new game. So it is another special, built like me, a special variable that is set when certain functions are used in HyperCard. So the answer function doesn't actually return something, it sets it to what the value is. It's another weird idiosyncrasy. I would have rather had put the answer of, you know, blah, blah, blah into variable name or something, but that's not how they did it. He has this concept of having it, and the book goes into a lot of detail about what it is. Another weird thing. Reset status. So here I'm going through and resetting all your stats to 0. Add a letter to the word. So this is that routine that was going through, is putting the letter into the word. It sets the word letter, displays the letter. So display letter is taking the current column row and figuring out the letter box and or the tile and putting the letter in there. Deleting a letter. So I have to handle your typing, you backspace, you type some more. You can't delete from the column or row above you. So if you're on if you've already deleted the first character, delete doesn't mean anything anymore. It can be a mess. You can't just assume that, you know, I set, when you type a letter, I set the row and column so that the current one is the empty box. Well, if you're at the end of the row, you can't set the next box. It's the same box. So I had to go through a bunch of stuff to make sure that I was actually doing deleting correctly. And you guys don't want to hear about that. You can read the code later if you want to see. Get the current game word. So this is where it's a function to get the match. I get the game number and put it in the game, and I return the first word of line the game of card field words. So that's how you get the word from that long list, that field. So there's chunking expressions for fields. You can search for things. You can say, get the fourth letter of the third word of line number 5. Chunking expressions are pretty expressive and complicated, and there's also a find function that will highlight text for you, so you could have the code go highlight a word or a line or something in a text box, and then you can ask what the selection is, which means somebody could have selected text, and that fires off an event, and you're able to say, what is the selection? So there's a lot of really cool functionality in there for interacting with the user. These are get set functions, so it's kind of a object-oriented sort of concept where I return the card field row for get row. Return the card field column that's the volume that's in that card field. So instead of referring to card field col or column, I call a function. Less efficient code-wise, but if I ever had to change the name of it or go from a card field to something else or put it on another card, so now you have to refer to card field row on card, foobar, a different card. This way I don't have to worry about it. So here's an example. Put the 1 into card field we won. Actually, I was looking for another one. Okay. Set win row. Put the value into line and some calculations of background field data of card stats. So those are background fields. There's a background field on the stats card that's used to drive the graph. And you can't see it, it's hidden, but it's there. And this is how I get the data for updating the stats into that chart. Increment win row, get the plays. So this is all referring to fields that are on another card. So put the value into card field plays of card stats. So that stats card is called card stats. I could have a plays on this card and a plays on that card, and it would be able to figure them out. Get the wins, set the wins, get the losses, yada, yada, yada. So that's it for the code for that. And I think that's enough for this session. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. HyperCard is a little bit, freaky in its syntax sometimes. I quite often have to dig up the reference because I have forgotten exactly, do I put the in this one or not? And sometimes you get an error message. Sometimes it just ignores what you're doing. So it can be a little frustrating. Next time I'll go over the debugger and how you use that, because it actually does have a debugger. It's crude, but it's better than nothing, right? I think that's probably enough for today. We are over an hour, and I was trying to target an hour. There you go. That's kind of the introduction to this HyperCard stack and how it works. Let's do this. I didn't really demonstrate it much. So let's reset, and let's try some words. Let's enter. So I is in the correct position for cigar, right? Let's try another one. ING are in there, right? And they're in the right position. So if I tried some other word, that's not a word. So it flashed and it gave me a chance to go back and do it again. Hey, there's an A in it. And of course I screwed up because I didn't use the ing in the right positions. P-O-R-E-D, poured. Oh, there's an R. So, it's Wordle. That's how Wordle works. Gives you an idea. So let's lose and see how bad we get. G-I-L-A-S and P-O-R-A-L. Aw. Sorry, the word is cigar. Play again. So that's how we got that okay and cancel. So I'm going to say cancel. I don't want to play again. I'll do it tomorrow. Stats. We played one, we lost. Zero game guess distribution because we didn't win. If you had a 7 here, I guess it could represent you tried 6 times and you lost, but, or you could have lost and then show how many times you lost. Anyway, so let's go back. I guess we'll just leave it at this right now. So I want to thank you if you actually survived and watched this whole thing. Hopefully it was entertaining. Hey, this is Eric from Eric's Edge signing off. Happy Marchintosh, and I'll see you on the next video.